Hi, I'm just coming up to the halfway point in a 2 day fast, and I do this quite regularly, usually every 2 weeks, just a 1 or 2 day fast, just for fun. um, so I will test my blood glucose using my glucometer that I've got here, and we'll see how I'm doing. So it's 2.7. So yeah, that's not too bad. Um, that's actually typically within my normal range. So it's it hasn't really changed too much. My blood glucose is always quite low and stable. I'm on such a restricted ketogenic diet that it mimics a long fast anyway. So even when I go on these very short fasts of just a couple of days, it seems to not change too much, and it's not too difficult because I'm in this ketogenic state where my body's used to having very low blood glucose and using fat for energy. So it's not a huge metabolic change for me. I would check my blood ketones as well. I would guess that they're in the range of between 5 and 6, probably even more than that. Usually it can go up to, during this kind of fast, it usually goes up to around 7 in the late afternoon / early evening. So, and I feel completely fine when it does that. Feel very alert, I'm very productive with my work, and I'm able to get a lot done. So I've actually been doing some research into um, just explaining in a way that I can better explain why I do this fasting and how it works and why I fast regularly. So I think sometimes people need to be aware of just why and how the ketogenic diet actually works for cancer management. And the main mechanism of action, the main way it works is that it's mimicking fasting. So people often ask me what I eat and what I'm doing, and sometimes the main benefit is not what you're doing, it's what you're not doing. So not eating, or any way that you can mimic a long fast, has huge benefits. Two of the things that are acted upon, I'll try to explain it in simple terms because it's quite complicated, is something called FGF21, which kind of means nothing to most people, but that is fibroblast growth factor. So that is a family comprising of at least 20 to 22 members, which is involved with many processes. Yeah, that's the correct word. Many processes involving development, differentiation, cell survival and growth, wound healing, and importantly for cancer management, tumor formation. So we're talking about specifically with fasting, what we see is circulating levels of the fibroblast growth factor 21 is elevated as we get into this state of fasting. And that's what we see in humans, particularly with this with the longer fasts. So that's why I try to push my approach as much as I can to mimic a long fast. So a long fast would typically be 30 days plus. So this is, well, I guess 20 to 30 days and beyond. So properly a long water fast. Some people do dry fasts as well, but I wouldn't do that, especially with epilepsy. And when I do any kind of fasting, a water fast, I have to make sure that I maintain an electrolyte balance within my brain, as I have reflex epilepsy, which I've mentioned before. But when I do go on these fasts, there comes a point where I actually have almost no seizure activity, which is fantastic. The longer I seem to be able to go on and maintain that correct balance for me, the better I feel, the sharper I feel, the more mental clarity and acuity I seem to possess, which is quite nice. It's a nice feeling. I wish I could just not eat ever, but because I've got such a low body fat percentage, that's probably not a great idea. So I spoke about FGF21, and that complements being on a ketogenic diet. It also works alongside something called peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha, so PPARA, and that is a transcription factor that plays a major role in metabolic regulation. So if we're treating cancer as a metabolic disease, then it's important to make the most of those processes where in fasting, that is promoting autophagy. And even when you learn at the very basic level these biological processes in the cells with peroxisomes, which is kind of scavenging, for want of a better expression and way of explaining it, a way of scavenging. The peroxisomes scavenge hydrogen peroxide in the cells. So hydrogen peroxide would be a pro-oxidant. Yeah. So it's scavenging for that, and it's so that metabolic regulatory mechanisms are regulated to so it's kind of clearing things up, and it does that alongside the we're told this in really basic cell biology, just when you look at the cells and the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria and all this stuff. So that is also working with lysosomes. So lysosomes are they're like these little circular things in the cells. That's how they're displayed when you're making all those fun diagrams, when you're doing very basic cell biology. Lysosomes are the ones that are involved with these autophagus, if that's a word, autophagus processes. I've made it a word. The process of autophagy. Lysosomes. Lyse means, well, it's just the word for cut. Lyse just means to cut. So these lysosomes are heavily involved with the process of autophagy. Autophagy just means self-eating. So the human body is very clever. It has processes of, that's my word of the day today, of clearing up defective mitochondria, which is what cancer cells essentially are. That's one of the hallmarks of cancer, that they have defective mitochondria. That's why they ferment glucose and all these other things. So if we are in a fasted state, you're in a situation where your body your body is better able to efficiently do what it has been evolved to do, and is very clever at doing, and is why we've been able to respond to so many stressors as we have evolved. So when we're in a fasted state, our bodies are it's kind of like an analogy of, if you're a very busy person and you have a specific day to set aside to clean your house, you could say, as an analogy, that when you're having this day when you have no other responsibilities, you're able to clean everything up in the house. And the house can be an analogy for your body. So if your body isn't preoccupied with metabolizing all these nutrients that you're constantly taking in through food, it's able to have a clearing up process of all the of all the defective mitochondria, as I mentioned, and it's just able to clean everything up quite impressively, and it does so through this FGF21 and through primarily there are many metabolic processes which are affected by state of fasting. So these peroxisomes and FGF21. So it's really exciting, and fasting is not always easy, especially when you've got low body fat and epilepsy, but the potential benefits definitely outweigh any potential risks from it, which are much fewer than people would be led to believe, because they typically confuse fasting with starvation, which it's not. The human body can fast for many days, 20 plus days, very easily. Significantly more than that as well. And if you're in a state of ketosis before you've gone on to any kind of fasting, it becomes just like a walk in the, not like a walk in the park, but much easier, because you're already in a state that is mimicking fasting. So your body is used to using fat for energy. You don't have to expel all this glucose, all this glycogen through your urine as you're adapting you're already metabolically adapted into that kind of state. So it's you're already hormonally regulated to adapt to that state, which is great. And your liver doesn't have to adapt, your brain doesn't have to adapt. Your brain's already in a state where it's primarily using ketones for energy. And your liver is used to producing beta-hydroxybutyrate. So it's already in a state that you want it to be in. So I've waffled enough. I was trying to look for some interesting stuff to add to that. So yeah, it's interesting when we look at animals as well, just how there are transgenic animals. So transgenic just means, typically in these studies, what they do is they get organisms that have genetic material into which DNA from an unrelated organism has been artificially introduced into that animal. In this case, we're looking at FGF21, which I mentioned earlier is expressed to a greater degree when you're fasting, and that is involved with metabolic processes that can improve blood glucose control, insulin, triglycerides, and it helps with this process of autophagy, and it's been shown in rodents to have that effect, diabetic monkeys, and more recently, which is surprising because you would expect more. They say it's more recently in the studies. It's not really recent. We've known this for many years. So for health reasons, but I guess it's easier to see visibly now in the lab. So that's what they mean when they say recently. So we see that this is also the case in humans more recently in these studies. So this is a protective mechanism that has evolved to aid survival in periods of famine, and this is something that, again, is nothing new. This is how we've evolved, and humans are tough, so we need to remember that we have these innate mechanisms that we can use for a myriad of different conditions, and sometimes the food gurus will tell you need to buy these specific special medicinal foods, these functional foods. You need to have all these magical ingredients. You need to cook all this amazing dishes that look like food porn, nice and shiny and beautiful to look at, and these ketogenic cakes and things. And no, you don't. The main thing that you can do to help yourself is to not eat, and that might sound just too simple, but sometimes sometimes we can overcomplicate things, and it's actually the simple approach that is the most sensible. So not eating, fasting regularly, you can either do that as intermittent fasts, or you could maybe every few weeks or every month, or if you're trying to prevent cancer, once a year you could do just a 7-day fast even, or a 10-day fast when you just don't eat for 10 days, and that could be very beneficial for you. There's so much evidence on intermittent fasting and showing the benefits of that. I'm just a huge fan of fasting, and from the benefits I have already seen from that, that is a huge part of my approach. I am experimenting at the moment with kind of like an omega-3 fast. So it's fasting where I consume fish oils and that's it. So fish oils, and I have salt preparations in my water. So that is to maintain the electrolyte homeostasis in my brain. 3 times a day I will have my my water with my fish oil supplement, and the water will be a mixture of sodium, potassium, and magnesium chloride. So it's sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, and potassium citrate. Some days that I do it, I actually don't add the potassium citrate because I don't feel a need to. I often just go with how my brain feels, and that served me quite well because I see the epilepsy and the sensitivity of my epilepsy as a hidden, not a hidden blessing, but I see it as a blessing. So it's a mixed blessing, I suppose you could say, because it's not too pleasant, but it's everything that I have used to manage the epilepsy. Even as an afterthought, I have realized after I've studied it in more depth, the things that I've done that have been effective have also seemed to present as having significant benefits to manage the cancer. So if I get feedback with my seizure activity that something is working really well, and I look it up and I realize that it's managing the cancer better, that gives me great feedback as to what could be potentially very useful for managing the cancer, and that's invaluable. It's very difficult and challenging, and can be a source of great frustration and just a source of difficulties and complications at times. But it's hugely valuable resource to use that I would be foolish to not pay attention to. So that's hugely encouraging, and I've been very productive with my studies today. So today is a revision day for my pharmacology exam, and I've been at it since 5 a.m. so I've been taking little breaks here and there. So I thought I'll produce a random video about fasting because I'm fasting today. So I've rambled on enough. I need to stop procrastinating and get back to work, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about fasting. I'll try and put some information down below about fasting and just about what I've spoken about, FGF21 and PPARA, I think I mentioned it as. Yeah, PPAR. I guess it's PPAR alpha. PPAR alpha. So peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha. So those are very important in this adaptive process of using ketones and just fatty acid oxidation to make the most of this innate process, these innate processes that we have to metabolically manage cancer more effectively. So again, I will see you soon, and au revoir.